Hi everyone, as promised, we will be looking further into the glycolysis stage of both aerobic and anaerobic respiration today and see what actually happens. To kind of just recap, what glycolysis is essentially the first step of both the aerobic and anaerobic respiration processes. And what it essentially does is it breaks down glucose into two pyruvate molecules. And as you can probably infer from the number of carbons that glucose has, a pyruvate molecule will accordingly, because it is essentially half a broken down version of glucose, it's going to be a 3C molecule, meaning that it has 3 carbons. And in the process of doing so, we're going to obtain 2 ATP molecules and 2 NADH and hydrogen ions. And again, to recap, NADH is a type of a reduced hydrogen carrier, which in the later oxidative phosphorylation stage, we are going to convert into ATP via the electron transport chain. But then again, that is a lesson for another video. So what's going to happen in the glycolysis stage is actually quite simple. We're going to start with a hexose sugar. Hexose meaning 6 carbons, and we're going to start with the hexose sugar, which is glucose. And what we're going to do is we are going to add energy into this. And the way we do this is interesting. We're going to have our hexose sugar. We are going to add 2 phosphate ions. We're going to add 2 phosphate groups. And how we do this is, remember how ATP is stored? Energy is stored in the form of ATP. And the way we obtain energy from an ATP molecule is via the breakdown of ATP into ADP and an inorganic phosphate ion, which we denote via this notation right here. So we are going to attach this inorganic phosphate group, 2 of these, to 1 glucose molecule. And now this is going to create what we see as an hexose bisphosphate molecule. And this hexose bisphosphate has a lot of energy, and this is going to increase energy. And therefore, because we have too much energy, naturally this molecule is going to be very, very unstable. And remember what happens to unstable molecules? Well, it undergoes the process of lysis, which pretty much means that it's going to divide. And so what we're going to get after this stage is we're going to get essentially a triose bisphosphate. We're going to get a triose bisphosphate, which means that from this hexose bisphosphate, because of the overload of energy, it's going to undergo the process of lysis, wherein it divides into 2 triose bisphosphate molecules. And please do note the words hexose and triose, each indicating 6 and 3 respectively, indicating the number of carbon atoms that are involved in this molecule. Now, what happens after this is we're going to get another phosphate group attached to each of these triose bisphosphates. So the way that it's going to look is, it's going to look like this. So we have 2 other additional phosphate groups attached, each of them attached to a triose bisphosphate. And in this process, we are undergoing first an oxidation reaction, and then second, a phosphorylation reaction. We're undergoing both of these processes. As the pi, which is indicative of inorganic phosphate group, sticks to the triose bisphosphate, what's going to happen is we're going to lose 2 electrons. And these 2 electrons will also be used in order to create the reduced hydrogen carriers that we've spoken of before, because as you can see, in the process of creating a reduced hydrogen carrier of NADH, we are going to need 2 electrons to create one of these molecules, and because we get 2 electrons from each of these molecules, we will ultimately end up with 2 of these. What happens after is we're going to get ADP molecules. Remember what ADP molecules are? They're essentially just ATP molecules that have been broken down into ADP and the inorganic phosphate group, where we're going to get ADP molecules. And they are going to each take these P phosphate groups. And they're going to take these phosphate groups and create ATP molecules from them. Because from this equation, we can derive that adding a phosphate group to an ADP molecule can lead to an ATP molecule. So we're going to get them, and we're going to get ATP molecules, and we're going to get 4 of them. We're going to get 4 ATP molecules. Now, at the start of this video, I told you that we're going to get 2 ATP molecules out of this process. However, according to the equation that we kind of derived, according to what looks like here in this diagram, it looks like we're going to get 4 ATP molecules out of this process. Well, then why do we say we get only 2? The reason for that is because we have we have added 2 ATP molecules at the start of the process in creating a hexose bisphosphate molecule from the hexose sugar glucose. So subtracting the initially used ATP molecules, we are going to get a total of 2 ATP molecules out of this process. And so ultimately, in our last process, we are going to get pyruvate molecules and 4 ATPs. We're going to end up with these. So this is pretty much the last stage of how glycolysis looks like. Each of these are pyruvate molecules individually, so we get 2 pyruvate molecules. And as you can see, we get 4 ATPs, but minus the number that we invested at the start, we're going to get 2 ATPs in total out of this process. And as promised, we will be getting these reduced hydrogen carriers. We'll be getting the reduced hydrogen carrier NADH, and we'll get 2 of these because the attaching of the phosphate group to a triose bisphosphate occurs for 2 of these. So obviously 1 for each of the triose bisphosphate, we are going to get 1 NADH plus H plus ion. So this is how it looks like at the end of the video. This is how glycolysis will occur. And thank you for watching this video. In our next video, we'll be covering the next stage of aerobic respiration, which is the link reaction.